So here I have the end cap for my shoulder vise with the 2-inch diameter hole drilled in there. Drill out the hole, which is the inside diameter of the screw. And here we have the tap to make the 2.5-inch diameter screws. This piece here has a 2-inch diameter hole drilled in it with a metal plate. You can see here it's set on an angle, which is the, so you call it the pitch for how many threads per inch you want. The farther this angle is out, basically the fewer teeth per inch you'll get. And this one has 2-inch or 2 teeth per inch. And you can see inside the hole the metal plate sticks through, and that's what catches the kerf that is cut into this dowel. To make the nut, you stick your dowel through the hole that you want to make a nut, and then turn it until it catches the metal plate. And this hole here is where you insert the cutter. Here we have a cutter that we've made out of an old file. So stick that into the hole, and then with this wedge, you stick the wedge in behind the cutter. We just made this little punch for tapping the blade in the wedge in, and then tap the blade so it just sticks out, and then tap the wedge back in. Now I'll clamp this and get it ready for tapping. Okay, now I have the tap all set up. I have a piece of plywood clamped to my 2 sawhorses, and there's a hole drilled through the piece of plywood for the dowel of the tap to go through. So I'm ready to take my first pass. I could feel the cutter stop cutting as it exited the end cap. If you make your first pass, you progress the cutter just a bit. And then set the wedge again. And make your next pass. Now with each pass you want to take a very light cut, because when you take the thicker cuts it tends to leave a rougher finish, and the tap will want to jam and it'll be extremely hard to turn this. So you have to take very fine passes. You want to make sure it's very easy, like it doesn't take very much effort to turn this. So it does take a few dozen passes to get a nice clean cut. So I've done maybe 10 or 12 passes, and you can see how the nut's progressing so far. You can see the channels are very thin at the moment. I also want to mention the empty space that's cut into the guide block for the tap's dowel. It has a cutout here, which allows room for the wood chips to come out after the cutter finishes going through the piece that you're tapping. It also gives a place for the cutter to go without chewing up the guide block. Every once in a while you may want to take 2 passes with the same setting if you feel that the first time the pass was a little harder than it should have been. If you're ever cutting a pass and you feel that it's at the very end you don't hear it cutting, it's probably because the cutter is jammed up with some chips, so you may want to back it out a little bit and then go through again. Sometimes the last portion of the pass will not cut as nice because it is jamming, so you can just go over that spot again. See, I'm almost done making the nut now. I don't have too much more to go. When you are tapping your hole to make your nut, you're going to want to check to see how far your cutter is sticking out with a rule. So every once in a while you can take the tap out of your hole to see your progress. For my nut, the blade needs to stick out 1/4 inch, and the rule says I have about 1/32 of an inch to go. You can see here I finished the 2.5 inch diameter nut. You can see where the cutter exit the hole, tears the wood fibers out a little bit, so you just need to use a knife and sort of chamfer that edge there. So turned out pretty good. Where the end grain is, the finish is a little bit rougher, but where you have the long grain, the finish is very smooth. Here I have the tap for making 2-inch diameter screws. Making this nut for the screw for my tail vise. I'm using a 2-inch screw for this because a 2.5 inch won't fit. So I'll show you the difference in the size between the 2 and the 2.5. The 2-inch tap here has a 1.5 inch dowel, which is the inside diameter of the threads, and the 2.5 inch tap has a 2-inch diameter dowel, which is the inside diameter of the 2.5 inch screws. For the wooden screws that I make, I have a 90-degree cutter. Here we have the cutter, and you can see against the rule that the geometry of the blade has a 90-degree angle, not a more acute 60-degree angle. This creates a beefier thread, which is what was traditionally done. Many newer wooden screws have a 60-degree angle like most metal screws, but for wood a 90-degree angle is much stronger. Here I have the finished nut for the tail vise. I also cut the end cap to length on the bandsaw and cut this notch out on the bandsaw as well. Here I have a 2-inch screw that I had made previously. It was just a sample. I just wanted to show you how the screw works. The vise will be attached to the screw with an internal garter closer to the hub, which will move the vise in and out.